A false flag operation is a covert operation designed to deceive, oftentimes an entire nation, to make them believe a particular group or other nation is responsible for some activity. Many events like this have happened in order to further the agenda of governments who want to galvanize a nation to get behind that agenda, but nothing stays buried for long. Many events have been exposed as false flags. The following are just such cases which will leave you speechless. Here are 10 sinister false flag operations. Number 10 is the Mukden Incident. Also known as the Manchurian Incident, the Mukden Incident was used to justify an entire war. The war in question was the Second Sino-War between Japan and China. The false flag operation which led to this conflict was carried out on the 18th of September 1931. A lieutenant in the Japanese army planted explosives next to a railway line which was used by Japan's own South Manchuria Railway. The explosion was intended to weaken the track and derail the next passing train. However, the explosion wasn't strong enough and it only damaged the track. It was still used as an excuse for war by the Imperial Japanese Army, who falsely claimed that Chinese dissidents had planted the explosives in a direct attack on Japanese sovereignty. This was used by Japan as an excuse to invade and conquer the region. Number 9 is Operation Northwoods. Operation Northwoods is one of the most controversial proposed false flag incidents in history. Not just because it was to be perpetrated by the United States to start a war with Cuba, but also because it was overseen by the Department of Defense and the Joint Chiefs of Staff of the US government. Operation Northwoods would have given permission to the United States government to attack its own civilians and military, and then blame this on the Cuban government. The attacks were to include sinking Cuban refugee boats, hijacking commercial American flights, and blowing up a US ship, and orchestrating a terrorist campaign on American soil. All of this was to trick the American public into supporting war. The plan was eventually vetoed by JFK, but many point to the proposal as a dark day for US ethics. Number 8 is the Winter War. The Winter War was a brutal conflict between the Soviet Union and Finland, and it was all started by a false flag operation. The entire affair was a ruse by the Soviet government to capture Finnish territory in 1939. Just months after the outbreak of World War II on November 26th, the Soviets launched an attack on the village of Manila. What's so shocking about this is that it was a Soviet village. The Soviets shelled Manila and then reported several deaths. In the aftermath, the Soviet Union claimed that the shells had been fired by Finnish artillery positions on the nearby border. This ruse was then used to justify invading Finnish territory and starting a war. And that war was a brutal one. Many died as the temperatures dipped to a biting minus 43 degrees Celsius. When peace was finally agreed upon, the Soviets had taken 11% of Finland's territory. Number 7 is Project TP Ajax. In 1953 Iran, the then Prime Minister Mohammad Mossadegh was overthrown in an uprising. It wasn't until 2013 that it was publicly revealed that this uprising was engineered through a false flag operation. The American CIA were directly involved in the uprising, which was a coup to remove the leader of a foreign country and replace him with one sympathetic to American interests. It was conceived at the highest level of the US government behind closed doors. In the run-up to the coup, American-Iranian negotiations over Iranian oil had stalled, and it was clear that the Soviet Union would benefit massively by striking a deal themselves with Iran. In order to stop this, CIA-led propaganda was then spread through the press and other means to incite unrest and bring down a democratically elected government. Number 6 is the Rousseau Swedish War. False flag operations are nothing new. Several go back centuries, including a plot to start a war between Sweden and Russia. In 1788, an opera company in Russia, which was used to make costumes for its productions, was asked to create a number of authentic-looking Russian military uniforms. Elements within the Swedish aristocracy then used these uniforms to stage an attack on a Swedish outpost along the border with Russia. Until this point, the Swedish government had refused to get involved in a conflict with Russia, despite recent tensions. The false flag operation changed all that and allowed the then King of Sweden to launch a 2-year war against Russia with the blessing of the Swedish government. The Swedish king was then assassinated after the war during a masquerade ball due to his zeal for war. Number 5 is the Kormoran Raider. False flag operations often involve duping enemy forces into a false sense of security before unleashing a deadly attack. This is exactly what happened on November 19, 1941, when an Australian ship fell for this fatal trick. It was during the Second World War, and Australian merchant vessels were helping the war effort against the Nazis and their allies by transporting supplies. To blockade these supplies, the Nazi cruiser, the Kormoran, was disguised as a friendly ship through the Atlantic and then Indian Oceans. Due to her fake appearance, the Kormoran was able to sail much closer to Allied vessels than any other ship of her kind. This allowed the ship to launch a surprise attack, even though this broke international law. The Kormoran sank 10 vessels before most famously sinking the Australian cruiser, the HMAS Sydney. Number 4 is the LaVon Affair. The LaVon Affair was a covert operation carried out by Israeli government forces. In 1954, elements within the Israeli government wanted to bring enough attention to Egypt's Suez Canal zone so that British forces would remain there, maintaining a European presence sympathetic towards Israel and therefore controlling the canal and its use for commerce. A false flag operation was devised to achieve this aim. Israeli military intelligence operatives were to plant bombs in Egypt with the intention of destroying Egyptian, British, and American-owned buildings. This would then be blamed on the Egyptian group, the Muslim Brotherhood, as well as communists. While no civilians were killed, several operatives were. The operation was uncovered and the Israeli defense minister had to resign as a consequence. Number 3 is marble framework. While most false flag incidents are either physical acts of terror or the spreading of propaganda, in the modern-day world of cyber espionage, hacking software has been used to falsely implicate other nations of aggressive behavior. This occurred recently with the Marble Framework. The Marble Framework is a piece of software which inserts fragments of foreign language code into malware. When that malware is used to incapacitate a website or fish for secrets from foreign governments, investigators attempting to find the source of the malware are misled by the foreign language code fragments into thinking another country was to blame. While no one is quite sure to what extent the framework has been used, it's clear that it was developed by the CIA before being leaked to WikiLeaks. Number 2 is the Reichstag Fire. Perhaps the most famous and most damaging false flag operation of all time, The Reichstag Fire set a chain of events in motion that allowed Adolf Hitler to increase his stranglehold on the German government and its people. The fire took place in Berlin on the 27th of February 1933. The Nazis claimed that a communist agent had been found at the scene, and therefore the attack on the Reichstag was a communist attempt to grab control of the country. Hitler and his supporters then used the public outrage to bring about the Reichstag Fire decree, which allowed opponents of the Nazis to be rounded up and arrested, while freezing civil liberties in the pursuit of supposed security. Many historians believe that the fire had been deliberately orchestrated by the Nazis themselves, and the rest is history. And number 1 is the Gulf of Tonkin Incident. The Gulf of Tonkin Incident in 1964 was a confrontation between North Vietnam and the United States. One was the North Vietnam attack on the USS Maddox, a lone destroyer in the region, and another attack on the same ship 2 days later. Many now believe that at least one of these incidents was staged, if not both. This included faking an attack on US personnel, as well as faking radar data to show North Vietnam boats which did not exist. In 2004, a former United States Secretary of Defense came forward and admitted that at least one of the attacks was faked in order to give America an excuse to enter the Vietnamese conflict. As a result of this lie, nearly 60,000 US personnel died in the conflict, and as many as 1 million Vietnamese on both sides of the border.